Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on the European Union Chemical Strategy for Sustainability, organized by APPLiA, representing the home appliance industry in Europe. And today we have the perfect panel to discuss about the crossroad between different policies, the chemical policy, the product policy, and the waste policies. And I look forward to the discussion that will follow with the audience. We have a welcome and introduction, which is this one that I'm doing right now. And I will pass the floor in a minute to our keynote speaker. There will be time to have a couple of questions with him. Then we go to the rest of the panelists, and we have a final Q&A session. And it is my pleasure now to introduce Finn Pedersen from the DG Environment in the European Commission that will tell us all that he can about the chemical strategy for sustainability. Finn, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us from the Commission to present both issues on the chemical strategy and also how it relates to the Sustainable Products Initiative and circular economy and waste. I prepared some slides. I don't know if they can come up on the screen. Yes, thank you. The next, please. As you know, when the new Commission came in the end of 2019, they presented the European Green Deal with a lot of activities, very ambitious. And one of them is to have a zero pollution ambition for a toxic-free environment, and another is to mobilizing industry for clean and circular economy. Next, please. Next slide, please. When we started preparing the chemical strategy for sustainability, we set up a vision towards a toxic-free environment. And the vision is that chemicals are produced and used in a way that maximizes their benefit to society while avoiding harm to the planet and the people. And another vision is that the production and use of safe and sustainable chemicals, materials, and products becomes the EU market norm and a global standard. Next, please. In the chemical strategy, we have 5 building blocks, and of course, it's very detailed, so I don't have the time to go into this. So I picked up a number of issues that are relevant for our discussions today. The next slide, please. First of all, we want to boost innovation, and innovation in a way that will boost clean circularity. And this different actions to do that is to set up criteria for what do we mean by safe and sustainable by design on substances, materials, and products. We want to establish a network that can support various innovation activities among all partners, and in particular, of course, including industry. We will make a support for industrial innovation, and we will identify key chemical value chains. Next slide, please. When we are looking at the connection between chemicals and products, we are mainly looking at substances of concern. And what are substances of concern? For us, it's substances that are of very high concern as identified under the REACH regulation. It's other substances with chronic effects, which are identified in the CLP regulation. And then there might be some substances that are affecting the recycling to safe and high quality secondary raw materials. All these substances are essentially identified via the CLP regulation. And for this to be able to do that, we will introduce new hazard classes, so we can identify endocrine disruptors, we can identify persistent bioaccumulative and toxic substances, and we can identify persistent and mobile substances. Next slide, please. We also want to, as one tool to make cleaner material cycles, to restrict the most harmful substances in consumer products. As you know, the Commission can already today and are today restricting CMR substances in consumer products, but we want to extend this mandate so we can also restrict endocrine disruptors, persistent substances, and bioaccumulative substances in consumer products. And we also want to be able to restrict the use of substances that are affecting the immune system, neurological system, or receptor systems, and other substances are toxic to specific organs. As many of the products that are actually marketed for consumer use are also used by professionals, we want to extend these restrictions also to products for professional use, at least some professional uses. But of course, we know that some substances might be essential for society in one way or the other. So we want to identify a way where we can exempt essential uses, so they are only allowed if they are essential for the safety of the health or critical for the functioning of the society. Next slide, please. So all of this should help to create non-toxic material cycles. And in order to uptake secondary raw materials in new products, we should have the goal that primary and secondary materials and products are always safe, of course. But this could be required or ensured by using the same limit values for substances of concern for both virgin materials and for recycled materials. It's not always so easy to do that, and we know that there will be a need for derogation for this principle in exceptional circumstances, which should be identified case by case, and it should be for a time-limited time period. Next slide, please. So how does it all feed into the sustainable product policy? I guess you know maybe more of this than I do, but clearly it's in the design phase of products that are really determining how the environmental impact of the product will be during the whole lifetime. And that's where it fits back to the whole issue on safe and sustainable by design. And one issue that is really important for that is to, as we have said, we want to address the presence of hazardous chemicals, and in particular the substances of concern should be reduced as far as possible. And we should at the same time also increase the content of recycled materials. The work on this sustainable product policy is ongoing. We think that there will be a Commission proposal by the end of this year. Next slide, please. And maybe just a few words before I finish off on the process and participation in the work. And this is mainly related to the chemical strategy. We are setting up a high-level roundtable where representatives from industry, including SMEs, of course, from science and from civil society, And I guess you know that there is a call out right now for nomination to this high-level roundtable. So this is a way for different stakeholders to keep us informed about their views on how the chemical strategy should be implemented and further developed. We are also now planning the targeted amendment of the REACH and CLP regulations, including the amendments that I informed you about just a few minutes ago. All of these amendments, of course, will be based on a very thorough impact assessment, because this is what the Commission has promised for a long time. We have the better regulation principles. And during these impact assessment, we will make quite a number of public consultations where everyone can provide their views, so they can be taken into account. And I think that we will rather soon, I hope either here in March or beginning of April, be able to publish what we call an exception impact assessment, or a roadmap. It will be published for commenting in 4 weeks. I think this is what I wanted to say here as a start for the discussion. Thank you for allowing me to present.
Thank you, Finn. It has been very interesting. We have time for a couple of questions. If anybody from the audience is willing to ask a question, can type in the chat that you have. In the meantime, maybe I can ask you a question, which I think it is the heart of the discussion that we are having. In the sustainable product policy, the idea is to address the presence of hazardous chemicals and increase the recycled content. And I think that is exactly the point where more work is needed. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. And this is why we are focusing on, first of all, to get rid of the most problematic chemicals in products as far as possible. And then it should be combined with all this initiatives of innovation. It's clear that from the Commission side, we cannot do all the work. We can only try to set the framework, and we can make regulation, and we can make support, both technical support to some extent and funding for concrete projects and so on. But the real work needs to be done by industry and the partners there. And of course,
okay.
Yes, thank you.
And then I think it's a very nice challenge for the other speakers in the panel that is following. I have another remark, because you rightly pointed out that digitalization will probably be useful in tackling also the use of chemicals, the better recycling of plastic materials. And the digital product passport has been in your charts. How do you think we can make the best out of the tool so that the benefit will definitely outweigh the cost?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question. The problem is, of course, that there are so many different products, and that means that to establish product passports for all these products is really a challenge. But it's an even bigger challenge, I think, to use all the information that will be available in these product passports, and in particular for recyclers. And I don't have the answer on this. This is clearly something that we are looking at, how best to use these tools. But as I said before, in reality, in the real world, it's you out there that have to use it in the best possible way.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Finn. It has been very helpful. And I would like now to thank you and move on in the discussion. And I would invite to the floor and to turn on the video if you can, Peter van der Zandt from the European Chemicals Agency. And he's the Director of Risk Management. Peter, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paolo, and thank you very much for inviting me to this event. Good morning, everyone. Very useful that I can follow up on the presentation, the high-level perspective that Finn has been giving. And I would like to add just a few comments from an ECHA perspective. We are not the policy authors of the strategy. We are in the role of supporting the Commission in implementing the strategy, and we have also been requested by the Commission on a number of those issues that I will go into now. Next slides. So if I could have the next slide, please. So you are already aware of the Commission communication on the chemical strategy. A lot of actions there foreseen, 56 and more. And of course, that will mean that there will be a lot of actors that will be involved in making sure that these actions come to effect. Clearly, there is an increased focus on the use of harmful substances in products and safe and sustainable by design. And this is, of course, very important, I think, also for your sector. And it is clear that many Europeans are worried about the impact that chemicals can have on their in everyday products that they use on their health, but also on the environment. And surveys have shown that the percentage of concerned citizens is above 80%. Next slide, please. So I will go directly into the content of where there are a number of actions where also we as ECHA will play a role in supporting the Commission in taking up the actions. And these are actions actually that of course are coming directly from the chemical strategy. There is already in the chemicals legislation in REACH a generic approach to risk management to protect consumers from the effects of substances that are carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reprotoxic. And the chemical strategy has identified that this approach should be extended. There should be no harmful chemicals in consumer products. And this generic approach should not only address the CMRs, but also endocrine disruptors, substances that are persistent and bioaccumulative, and in the second phase, also chemicals that are affecting immune, neurological, and respiratory systems, and chemicals that are toxic to specific organs. So this approach will be extended. It's one of the main actions that we also from ECHA will be involved in. In the meantime, because this will take some time to implement, the idea that has been put forward in the strategy is to have a restrictions roadmap where we will be looking at substances and groups of substances to prioritize these categories of substances in order to see whether we already need to proceed with preparing restrictions, as we already do and the agency in the context of REACH. Of course, the whole idea is to increase the protection of the children, professional users, and the workers, and consumers in general. When we are doing these restrictions, there is also now a new concept coming up that we have not been using before as such, which is called the concept of essential use. Because it is identified that, for instance, in the whole PFAS restriction, there should be an exclusion for essential uses. Now, what actually essential uses are and how we should use that in this context is something that needs to be developed. Next slide. Overall, the strategy foresees that there should be information provided in the future on life cycle and environmental footprint of substances and products, and also, of course, then this information to be used in the risk assessment that we do on substances and products. Overall, the strategy is supporting research and innovation, and in particular, actions are foreseen to develop criteria for safe and sustainable by design chemicals, because this could be really a way to make sure that any chemicals development and innovation is really from the outset aiming at safe and sustainable use. Therefore can have a large impact on future use of chemicals by society. The final slide is to show you what indeed the Commission has already requested our agency to support them in. A number of these are indeed the actions that I've been referring to. So safe and sustainable chemicals, we will be supporting or joining the discussions with the different stakeholders and Commission services on what that actually means. What could be criteria for safe and sustainable use of chemicals? One substance, one assessment is a main principle in the strategy. It means that we should harmonize how we do assessments, so to make sure that we also do not come to different conclusions by different bodies or in different types of legislation on the risks of chemicals. This could entail a potential reallocation of tasks among community bodies, but also aspects like having an open data platform and improving the coordination between authorities this perspective. Mixtures, one of the ideas from the strategy is to include also a mixture assessment factor. What would that mean? What would be the impact of that? We will be supporting the impact assessment on that. Generic risk assessment, I already mentioned, and of course the roadmap on restrictions is something that we are already having discussions right now with the Commission on how to prepare that and what substance to be included in the roadmap. The reform of REACH, one of the actions again in the chemical strategy is to look at the authorization and restrictions processes in REACH and see how they could be improved. Of course, from the experience that we have in the agency on the operation of these instruments, we can contribute to that discussion. We will be, of course, contributing to the research and innovation agenda for chemicals. And we have also been asked to cooperate with the Environmental Agency on indicators for chemicals in the framework of the 8th Environmental Action Programme. And last but not least, the Commission is foreseeing to increase its international role on chemicals policy, and they have also requested our agency to contribute to support the Commission in that endeavor. So thank you very much. That was my short introduction on the ECHA perspective and where we will be working together with the Commission to implement actions of the chemical strategy.
Thank you, Peter. Interesting, and I'm sure that there will be questions on that. I would move now to CEFIC with Nicolás Fuentes Colomer, Manager of Product Stewardship, that I would invite to the floor to get the view of the chemical industry on this very relevant topic. Nicolás, please, the floor is yours.
Right. Thanks a lot, Paolo, and thanks APPLiA for inviting me and for hosting this event. Before I start, I would like to just to say that what I will present here is by no means an exhaustive list of all the views that we have on every element of the chemical strategy for sustainability, but rather on those aspects that have a link with the with product policy and with the interface with chemicals and waste. And that, I think it's clear on the first slide. If I could see it, please. Thank you. I remember when I was invited to the event that the title was At the Crossroads of chemicals and the interface and waste and all this. So I thought it would be good to perhaps put an overview of all the actions, a picture that has been emerging for some time now, and that leads us to where we are with the chemical strategy, with the Sustainable Products Initiative, overall with the Circular Economy Action Plan, and with this idea of the non-toxic material cycles, which has been mentioned by the European Commission already. So certainly this is a policy area that doesn't come out of the blue, and these are objectives that don't come out of the blue. This is a road that we've been working together, industry, stakeholders, authorities for quite some time. If I can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. I wanted to highlight here some of the points that we made to the during the public consultation of the roadmap of the Sustainable Products Initiative that I believe that took place between September and November last year. And I thought that was a good point to highlight some of our messages on this. And as some of you may know, the core of the upcoming Sustainable Products Initiative is, as the Commission mentioned, is to expand the scope of the Eco-Design Directive to achieve this goal of non-toxic material cycles, to increase resource efficiency, circularity, etc. And that's an objective that the expansion is something that we support at CEFIC, and we highlight that the expansion of the action of eco-design should focus on the product groups that have been identified to have the, let's say, the highest circularity potential, if you will. However, there are some aspects that need to be taken into account, and one of them is a need for policy coherence, as we have seen with the presentation from ECHA and the Commission. There's an important interplay of different policy initiatives taking place. Certainly REACH, the upcoming REACH review, but also product-specific legislation and some other actions under the SPI. So it's important to keep policy coherence on the way forward. The aspect of circularity as well create a stimulus in demand for the secondary raw materials, and that's a point that is also something that we highlighted heavily, that there is a need to enable a single market for waste in the EU. And for the sustainability aspects of chemicals, we also put the highlight on the fact that the expansion of eco-design should employ a life cycle approach that is modulated depending on the product category. Then one of the core principles that is in the chemical strategy, and also at the work that we do at CEFIC, is the concept of safe and sustainable by design, for sure. And the chemical innovations should be part of the principle that drives the design of materials. That's certainly a shared vision. Just one quick mention to the tracking and tracing of information along the value chain and the digital product passport that we slightly mentioned. I think it was at the end of the Commission presentation. We really put the accent on the need to first ensure that a new framework for sharing information along the value chain should be a cross-industry effort, and should be ideally an aligned cross-industry effort. So engagement with the widest array of stakeholders is necessary. And we also put a strong focus on the feasibility and the effective implementation of any future information database or digital product passport. There is already quite some experience out there from companies, both from compliance with regulatory requirements, but also from innovation from the companies themselves that are working with new information systems for their products. So we really highlight the need to build on what already is out there, and learn the lessons, and figure out what works and what doesn't. So a very practical approach. If I could perhaps move to the next slide. And that's my last slide. What does this mean? What does this crossroad between chemical strategy and the Sustainable Products Initiative and all these actions on interface chemicals, products and waste mean for the companies that CEFIC represent for the chemical industry? Certainly, I think we can all agree that we're talking about a paradigm shift, a full full move that is larger than REACH, this strategy will shape the chemicals policy for decades to come. And as CEFIC, we support the public health and environmental goals of the strategy and the vision that is outlined by the European Commission, the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability. So this is we fully acknowledge that this is a paradigm shift, a leap, and we are on board with that. We of course highlight as well the need for this exercise, this leap, to be data-driven, and the need for transparency and expertise for these impact assessments that have been mentioned by the Commission. And again, the emphasis on coordinated industry implementation and the need to move forward with coherence, and the value chain cooperation. So those two elements go sort of hand in hand. One comment probably that we always make, and that I was very happy to see the Commission also highlight, is that we should turn this into an opportunity for Europe, really. And innovation, it should be a framework that enables an innovation approach that leads to sizable, tangible, really game-changing investments that can put us on the road to achieve the goals, not only of the chemical strategy, but also of the Green Deal overall. And last but not least, I think we can all agree this is a learning period from a policy-making point of view, but also for industry, and how to move forward and walk this road that the chemical strategy for sustainability put us into. So, right, I think that's all from my side for the moment. So thank you very much.
Nicolas, thank you very much. There are a number of points that I noted down that I'm sure will come back in the rest of the discussion. Let me now thank you, Nicolas, and move on to Lara. She represents us, APPLiA, the association representing the home appliance industry in Europe, and she's the Environment and Chemical Policy Manager, and she will tell us all more about this crossroad, which still is the heart of the discussion today. Lara, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Paolo. Yeah, so first of all, I think APPLiA, and I think I would like to highlight that APPLiA welcomes the new EU chemical strategy for sustainability, as it commits to harmonize, to simplify, but also to strengthen EU rules on chemicals. Our member companies, as Paolo was saying, they represent relevant downstream users of chemicals, which further manufacture and place on the market essential consumer products, home appliances, and as such, we would actually like to provide the sector's position and views on certain hot topics that we have chosen from the strategy. And the first one is the legacy substances. So the next slide. So the legacy substance issue is, and it will remain, the most critical issue in our view whenever addressing the chemicals, the products, and the waste policies. And as such, we'd actually call on authorities to treat this priority as a top one, and also to address it as soon as possible by first adopting a clear position on how to actually deal with such substances in the future. From our perspective, primary versus secondary materials in food contact applications, in drinking water applications, but also in medical devices, they should be subject to the same chemical requirements and conditions and rules. However, if we would talk about other applications, then we would actually face a dilemma, because if we apply the same chemical requirements between primary and secondary materials, it would be a plausible way to deal with materials coming from recycled waste streams and to support that products remain safe to use. However, the WEEE directive actually sets very stringent recycling quota that would actually be quite difficult to attain, because if we set stringent chemical requirements, that it may lead actually to limit or to slow down the uptake of recycled plastics in the EU, for instance. On the other hand, if we would apply different chemical requirements between primary and secondary materials, knowing that virgin materials chemical requirements are actually grounded on a risk-based approach, then we do think that repeated risk assessments on secondary materials should actually not yield different results when we are checking whether risk management measures should be needed or not. So in the end, we do think that politics will need to decide on the activities and on the priorities, which should be actually based on clear impact assessments, and which should also take into account the considerations of the specific actions, such as the contribution of we to the circular economy, but also the fact that we streams are actually very inhomogeneous. Now, removing legacy substances at the waste stage through innovative recycling technologies, could be a promising solution. And for that, an enhanced sector-specific close collaboration between manufacturers and recyclers could actually pave the way for the waste treatment industry to develop relevant recycling technologies to spot and to remove such substances in the future. On the Commission's wish to develop new tools on tracking and managing information on substances of concern in materials and products, we would really recommend for the authorities, to develop clear impact assessment exercises, as the exercise will actually advise on whether the type of information is relevant or not, and on whether the efforts to provide such data would yield benefits or added value to target users or not. In the last, I would say, specific case of long-lasting products like home appliances and substances of concern presence, we would like to say, though, that legacy substance issue will not be addressed by any tracking system or tool. Next slide. On the Sustainable Products Initiative, we are supportive of a more coherent EU policy framework for circular economy while preserving the single market, competition, and innovation. Even if we would agree for Europe to set rules on products to limit their impact on the environment, we do think that product characteristics should be regulated only if there's an actual evidence that there is a need for regulation with its related requirements that can be measured accurately and reliably. Overlaps between the SPI and existing EU legislations should be avoided, such as the ROS II or the Eco-Design Directive. On the Eco-Design Directive, because it has been mentioned, we are actually not supportive for this directive scope to be extended to cover non-energy related products. However, we do think that the existing current framework of the Eco-Design Directive is perfectly compatible with the aim of the SPI to energy related products like home appliances. As CEFIC, we actually also support a single market for waste. And last but not least, whenever setting the SPI, we also think that an open and transparent dialogue between all relevant stakeholders should be the norm. And next slide. My last slide is about the essential uses concept and the generic approach to risk manage. So on the essential uses concept from the Montreal Protocol, we do think that this concept would be unfit in this case scenario. So it cannot and it should not be transposed to define essential uses within the context of REACH, since REACH and the Montreal Protocol are very different legislations. They are not comparable to one another. They have different backgrounds, scopes, and objectives. Now, if the Commission would still go ahead with this concept of essential uses whenever it would have the mandate to do so, we do think that thorough discussions should be needed among all relevant stakeholders to define the criteria on what would be an essential use or not. So this is really key for us. Second, a risk-based methodology should remain the fundamental principle to properly assess and also manage chemicals in Europe. And last but not least, on the generic approach to risk manage chemicals in products proposal from the Commission, we think that if it would be implemented as is, we do expect severe use limitations of numerous substances in APPLiA products without actually any added benefit to human health and the environment, as substances of very high concern use in APPLiA products are actually already properly risk managed and also controlled.
Thank you, Lara. Very, very, very clear wish list expressed, and that will definitely power the discussion that we are going to have later. But that makes also a very good transition to Kaim Weibel from Plastics Recyclers Europe, because we are, in a sense, closing the loop with plastic recyclers, and we are addressing another important element of the crossroad of policies, which is how to deal with plastic waste. Please, Kaim, the floor is yours.
Yes, well, thank you very much. Good morning to you all, and thank you, APPLiA, for hosting this event and for inviting PRE. Before going into the discussion on the perspective of recyclers on this European Chemical Strategy for Sustainability, I would like just to briefly present who we are. So if you could go to the next slides. So PRE is the leading voice for making plastic more circular. We are doing that since several years now, and we have developed two projects that help this transition, which is UserPlast and Recyclast. So UserPlast is a tool for plastic recyclers certifying plastic recycling facility and enabling the traceability of plastic waste in a view to become one of the first step of a chain of custody for plastics. And Recyclast is a platform for brand owners and recyclers to cooperate by making scientific assessments and basing scientific protocols to deliver guidelines on how to place on the market now packaging, but in the future other products, plastic products, to be compatible with existing plastic waste streams and technologies, recycling technologies. So if you go to the next slide, just very briefly, we have more than 140 members. We provide insights market, we provide research and market reports on different plastic waste streams, including also technical plastics and electrical appliances. We have more than 140 members working in very different industry sectors where waste is generated. So we have a very good knowledge and broad overview on the recycling market in Europe and the current barrier, obstacles, and opportunities. So now going into the focus of this webinar, if you move to the next slide, yes, perfect. We see this strategy for chemical sustainability as bridging between the Green Deal, the circular economy, and REACH. And if we want to look just and focus our perspective on recycling, we see here a message to the recycling industry that in the short term we will have some changes. We will have more stricter rules for recycling of plastic waste, allowing for less derogation and authorization for substances of concern in recycled materials. Again, the chemical strategy targets all plastic packaging, plastic furniture, and electronic appliances. So it really goes on looking into these substances in the whole market for plastic recycling in industries in Europe. So if you go to the next slide, here you can see a very brief summary on what are the short-term effects that we expect. So again, because of this call on the European Commission to limit the use of derogation and authorization of substances of concern in recycled material, there will be higher requirement, not only just in plastic recycling, but in the whole value chain. And this can be obtained today if we have an improved separate collection sorted technologies that are capable of lowering this threshold and respecting the threshold provided by upcoming policies. And in order to do that, we need investments in the recycling of plastic waste to modernize the industry and to have an equal treatment across the EU. Because as you know, there are also talks on the waste shipment regulation. And in order to have an equal treatment across the EU, this would facilitate better quality recycling across the member states. The Commission in this communication provides also for future policies to develop methodologies for chemical risk assessment that consider the whole life cycle. So we see there a big opportunity, and also investments in sustainable innovation that can decontaminate waste. So in the short term, this is probably a set of challenges with that should be achieved bearing in mind two main goals, which is to always have a life cycle assessment of plastic products to be assessed scientifically against non-derogation. For example, the case of ECHA and the scientific assessment that has been conducted on the recycling of PVC. And this should be the basis for assessing whether or not the restriction should apply. And then to have also a clear set of policies in the short term that will allow in the long term to the medium to long term investments that are much required and of which I have already spoken. If you go to the next slide and last slide, this if we want to be very positive in the long term, we expect to have also with the instruments that we are working on, as I said before, to have a chain of custody system where more information on chemical composition is shared across the value chain. This would allow in the future to have a safer waste streams entering recycling facilities and hence a wider set of end applications for recyclates. Again, the long-term goal would be then to have an innovation on sustainable chemicals by design, to have this cross-value chain information on chemical composition, enabling this chain of custody, and this will probably lead to future plastic waste streams not requiring derogation and wider set of end application. Of course, this is a very broad discussion. In 5 minutes, it's very difficult to dig into the details. There are different sectors that have different way of treat waste, different life, and different timings also. So again, as it was said before, a case-by-case basis and approach is very welcomed when discussing on how to treat waste and how to treat and to legislate on recyclates. This concludes my presentation, and thank you, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think you pointed out to many like different challenges that we all will have to face to get to a better point. I would invite now everybody that has a question to write them in the Q&A space. Many have been written already. I would now stop sharing my screen and invite all the speakers to turn on their video so that we can have a full like view of all the speakers so that I can ask questions. And I have first one for the Commission, because the question is on which ground the Commission decided to change the currently accepted risk-based approach toward a more hazard-based approach, calling it generic approach to risk management. So I think this is for you, Finn.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I think Peter said the same, that we already have a generic approach in REACH, as the Commission has a mandate to propose to restrict substances that are CMR substances. I mean, carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reprotoxic substances. And when we are, and all other types of hazards and will have to be undergoing a very thorough documentation if we want to restrict the use of them. So it's up to the authorities to document that there is a risk, which is very difficult sometimes because it's difficult to find out how the substances are used and who are exposed to them and so on. And so this is a very long process. Of course, it's also a process where all stakeholders are involved and so on. But we thought that if we need to improve or increase the protection of health and the environment to the most hazardous substances, we should expand this mandate to the Commission so we can restrict not only CMR substances but also other substances that are of similar level of concern, you could say. And this is mainly in consumer products because whenever it's really difficult to control what consumers are doing with the products and how, both when they're using them and when they are disposing of them after use and so on. So this is a way to increase the level of protection.
Okay, very good. I believe I have another question for you. Sorry about that. Will the SCIP database be formally part of the future REACH legislation as APPLiA is for the energy label legislation? If you can
I don't.
your view.
We have not discussed SCIP in relation to REACH as such, so you know that this is something that came in the negotiations of the Waste Framework Directive in the last moment from the European Parliament. I think it was a request from them to establish such a database, and we are not looking into getting it into REACH. But of course, when the data are there, it should be used throughout the supply chain for all chemicals and so on, but it's not necessarily a REACH issue.
Thank you, Finn. I have a question to Sefik. What is wrong with the current applied risk-based approach in REACH, and why is the paradigm shift necessary? Nicolas, I believe you are muted. Okay.
I'm back. I think you can hear me now.
Thank you. Yes.
I mean, right. I don't think our message is that the current approach is wrong per se in the way. I mean, I think the question is framed. The message that we are trying to give is that we welcome the new safe and sustainable by design paradigm. The safety of a product needs to be confirmed at an early stage of the product development. I mean, that's clear. And building on the existing achievements that we already have, there's an opportunity to develop predictive toxicology tools to accelerate the chemical safety testing, minimize animal testing, and support the move overall to less hazardous chemicals, where technically and economically possible. I mean, banning or restricting the use of chemicals based on their hazardous properties alone, I think this is clear, does not take the full picture into account, and in fact, it can even be counterproductive to some of the sustainability goals. So just to be clear, what we do support is the shift to safe and sustainable by design.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Pierre. How could innovation in waste management be enhanced to deal with existing waste streams and enhance the market for secondary raw material so that we are not dependent only on cleaner feedstock and chain of custody?
Well,
so
of course,
innovation in waste management.
I guess innovation in the waste management is already occurring today. If we look, for example, at how sorting plants are developing in Europe, especially if we look at Germany or Italy. So it's going into a very big center where different plastic waste streams are treated in different lines within the same sorting center. And this allows to have a different mix of materials entering those sorting centers, and to have in the end, with the digitalization, with the near infrared technologies and other separation technologies, to have also higher amount of separatedly sorted plastic waste entering recycler facilities. Of course, key in these innovations, it should be looked also at the beginning of the value chain. So on the design, not only of designing chemicals that are toxic free, but also designing products that are recyclable. So design for recycling for us is very important, and this is also what Recyclas is doing right now for packaging. But we are planning to extend also the guidelines and methodologies for Recyclas, not only on recycled content, but also to a wider set of products, not limited to packaging. So design for recycling, better sorting, and also innovation on labeling, for example, these digital watermarking are all technologies that can help boosting the way recycling quality outputs are delivered with existing technologies today. Then in the future, if we want to speak about chemical recycling, that opens another discussion that I'm very willing to do, but I don't think it was part of the question itself.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Eike. And so for Peter, is ECHA tracking if and how recyclers are using the information provided by SKIP?
Well, at this stage, the answer is simple. We are at this stage including all the information that we can get for SKIP, but
okay, I cannot hear you very well. Maybe you can try to come a little bit closer to the microphone, because now it is 5 to 11, and I would like to conclude with you the webinar by asking you, what do you think it is the single most important thing to do in order to address the crossroad between these three different policies? And I will start with Finn. Just one sentence. You have 1 minute each. Finn, please.
I would say that the most important is to innovate and avoiding use of the most problematic substances.
Thank you. Thank you. Very clear. Peter, please.
Yeah, the problem is always when you put the question first to the Commission, they are going to say what I wanted to say. But I wanted to say, no, there is a clear message to you as an industry and to the sectors in the chemical strategy on which are the types of chemicals that are to be avoided in consumer products, and to give a signal also to your suppliers on what is it that you want the supply chain to deliver you and what not to deliver you. I think that is important, that this market, because I do not see, and we are of course an agency that is implementing chemicals legislation, but we can only do so much. The market is the biggest instrument to make sure that consumers are protected and do have a big role to play. And I think you can use the chemical strategy as a clear indicator of where the direction is, what to avoid, and also where to invest in terms of making sure that the future is safer and more sustainable. Thank you.
Okay, Peter, very, very clear. Nicolas, Sefik, your most important thing to address the crossroad.
Right, I'll try to be brief. Whilst the chemical strategy proposes, comprehensive and long list of legislative measures that have the objective to better protect citizens, and this is an objective we support, certainly. We would like to see more specificity and more clarity on how the second objective, a second objective can be met, and that's to boost innovation for the safe and sustainable chemicals. We see that the safe and sustainable chemicals and the objectives in the chemical strategy go hand in hand.
Okay, okay. Well, I like to say that actually chemicals are all around us. I mean, we could not live without chemicals. So definitely that's a very important point. Lara, please.
So from our perspective, I do think that addressing the legacy substance issue is a top priority if we want to also, I would say, enhance the interface between the chemicals or products and the waste policies. And also, I do think as well that developing sector-specific close collaboration upstream, but also downstream to enhance the flow of information is key when we're talking about chemicals and products.
Thank you, Lara. Pierre, Kain.
Well, for us, I think it's very important that there will be a good balance between different policy objectives. So between the chemical strategy but also the circular economy, so that we are not going into parallel, but again, cross-linking between different objectives. And also by taking into account that when you deal with waste, you're not dealing with the same uniform materials. So waste can originate from very different products that have different lifetime expectancies, leading that to the fact that if you want to derogate, you should give a time in derogation. If you want to provide innovation, you should take into account also when this innovation will take place for products that have like a 50 years long lifespan of use phase. So we look forward into these challenges and opportunities, and are happy to participate to any kind of stakeholder activities that the ECHA or the Commission is going to provide.
Thank you very much to you all. I think that the key message that I can definitely underline, it is that we all have to work together. The challenge is not a negligible one. Digitalization will help. Creating a single market for waste will definitely help in order to reach the economies of scale that would be needed in order to tackle the dimension of the issue. With this message, I would like to close the webinar. Thank you, all the participants, all the panelists, the keynote speakers, and I wish you all the best for this challenge. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.